A few months ago, I took a look at a little known game called Starbound. No, not that Starbound. This Starbound. Starbound 94, as I called it. It's a 2D turn-based space strategy game that was pretty decent, but nothing special. I'd highly recommend watching that video before continuing on with this one. But in that video, I mentioned that Starbound 94 had a sequel which was released in 1999. Well, here it is, Starbound 2. Yes, Starbound 94 got a sequel before the Starbound everyone knows and loves did, unless you count Far World Pioneers. Anyways, Starbound 2 was made by a company called Skyscape Software, formerly known as Catfish Software. Sadly, despite their logo and name, Skyscape Software has nothing to do with the Psy-Core from Babylon 5. While we don't have Alfred Bester, we do have Joshua Grass, Starbound 94's developer. He, Samuel Hamilton, and Pat Kelly, the only names listed in the game's credits, teamed up to make a game that was bigger and better than Starbound 94. I mean that too. Starbound 2 is basically the game I expected Starbound 94 to be. But before I get too far ahead, let's lay down one major caveat. Like its predecessor, Starbound 2 is only available for Mac. Even though a Windows version is mentioned in both the game's README file complete with system requirements, and Skyscape's long-defunct website is a thing that would happen by August of 2000, it doesn't exist as far as I know. Not only that, this game will only work on PowerPC Macs. Bear that in mind if you want to play this on actual hardware or in an emulator. In case you're wondering, I'm playing the final version of the game, version 1.01, with Infinite Mac, a web-based Mac emulator. Actually, emulators, plural. This particular emulator is running macOS 9.0.4, and I'll drop a link to it in the description. I should also note that physical copies of this game do exist. You could buy them from Skyscape for $40 US, and I've read that Joshua Grass gave a bunch of them away at one point. I imagine they're near unobtainium these days, but if you don't want to go through the trouble of waiting a million years for a copy to not appear on eBay, you can download this from places like Macintosh Garden. That's where I got this from. With all that established, let's dive into the game itself. Starbound 2 is a 2D turn-based space strategy game where you conquer a sector of space one planet at a time, eliminating all opposition. Okay, it's not as simple as that. I mentioned in my video about Starbound 94 how I expected that to be a 4X game when it really wasn't. This, however, I'd say yeah, this is a 4X. We have diplomacy options, there's a tech tree, you can conduct espionage and sabotage operations against enemy factions, you can have specialized buildings on planets, you can terraform planets, there's a propaganda mechanic. Obviously, none of that was in Starbound 94. The original 6 races of Starbound 94 make a comeback, complete with their own strengths and weaknesses. You can edit these races and make them overpowered if you want. You can even make your own races. I didn't play around with those features much, but they're still neat to see. In any case, pick your game mode, pick your race, pick the number of opponents you want to go up against, choose the smartness of their AI. Hang on, I gotta stop here for a moment. One of Starbound 2's biggest selling points is the fact that you can create and customize your own AI scripts. Like with the race editor, I didn't play around with this much. Once you're done realizing you can mod the crap out of this game and how much the character representing the humans wants to be an Imperial Stormtrooper, click begin and off you go. Much of what you'll see from now on will be of a complex game. Basically, it's the full-featured 4X mode. Simple makes the game look and feel more like Starbound 94, and medium, I didn't try medium. At its core, Starbound 2 plays similar to Starbound 94, no matter which game mode you pick. There's still a hexagonal grid that everything is bound to, but there aren't just planets and ships, not in complex mode. There are wormholes that warp your ships across the map, and stuff like nebulae that can screw things up. Each planet you control still always builds ships, provided you haven't turned the ship production slider all the way down, but there isn't just one ship type. There's 6, 7 if you count space docks, and 8 if you count trade ships. You can make your own designs using the existing ones as templates and upgrade them as you research new techs. Ships still have 4 basic stats: a number of moves they can make per turn, weapon strength, shield strength, and number of hexes their sensors reach. The texts give you different weapon and shield types to choose from, like torpedoes and lasers and such. Some ship components can modify a ship's stats, like engines that can give ships an additional movement point above its base stat. And yes, in case you haven't noticed by now, this game has music. It gets repetitive after a while, but you can use your own music tracks in-game, or turn off the in-game music entirely. These are just the tracks my copy of the game came with. Actually, the sound design overall is much improved from Starbound 94. As funny and charming as Starbound 94's sound effects can be, what Starbound 2 has works to give it a more polished feel. Space battles are still a thing, but they're much more involved than they were in Starbound 94, at least if you have the real-time space combat feature enabled. If you don't, they work exactly how they did in Starbound 94, with ships not really doing much aside from firing on each other until one side wins. But yeah, the real-time combat is another neat feature Starbound 2 adds. Going back to planets for a bit, there's a good chance you'll need to terraform a planet in order to make it more livable for your people. It takes a while, especially if you've just dropped a settlement on it, but I'd say go for it. It's a thing you can do in this game. Might as well do it. There's also a good chance you'll wind up in a situation where enemy ships are bombarding one of your planets from orbit, and they may or may not land troops on it to fight whatever you have on the ground. You still manage your planets by moving a bunch of sliders around, and there's still no real economy to deal with. Each planet has a specified number of output points, but they don't go towards a central pool of resources. Rather, I get the feeling they help determine how fast a planet levels up and how quickly they can make new ships, combined with those slider settings, that is. You can also mine materials like silver and palladium from planets, and tell friendly factions, hey, I have a bunch of X and Y sitting around that I want to trade for Z, provided you have at least a trade agreement treaty with those factions. I'm honestly not sure what they're used for otherwise, maybe something to do with output points or how fast a planet levels up its stats? I could be, and probably am, wrong on that, and other details I've blabbed on about in this video. I make it clear that I suck at 4Xs, but I still find them really fun to play every now and again, especially games like this. No joke, there was a point where I spent a good hour and a half playing this before I realized it was getting late and I seriously needed to go to bed. If that's not an indication of how good Starbound 2 is, I don't know what else I could say there. Actually, I guess I could say that this is what happened when Starbound 94 grew its beard. Like I said earlier, Starbound 2 is pretty much what I expected Starbound 94 to be, a much more complicated and complex game. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, Starbound 2 has online multiplayer. I didn't mess with that, but hey, that's one of my biggest complaints about Starbound 94 thrown out the window into a speeding truck headed for a landfill. Don't get me wrong, Starbound 94 has its positives, but Starbound 2 takes all of those and throws them into overdrive while adding a ton of neat new features. The best part? You can shoehorn Florins into this game. I won't try doing that, but it is possible. All jokes aside, Starbound 2 is surprisingly good. Not only is it more complex and polished than Starbound 94, it's much more fun than Starbound 94 was. I'll even go so far as to say it's worth a try if you're into 4Xs. Sadly, there is no sequel to Starbound 2, though what would a sequel be like? This, but with 3D graphics? A Starbound 3D, even? In any case, after releasing Starbound 2, Skyscape moved on to a game called Ferrum, which, as far as I know, was never released. Skyscape's website disappeared by the start of 2002, and that was that. That was the end of Skyscape Software. At least they left behind a fun 4X game that I'm glad I finally pointed a spotlight at. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoy this. Please consider doing all the typical supporting people on YouTube things. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye for now.